Welcome back to the Thought Leadership Series here at Online Marketing TV. We have LaSandra from Cisco, Ekaterina from Intel, Lauren from Salesforce.com, and Adrian from Dell. As you can see, we have some major brands represented here doing some big things in social media. So that's where I'd like to start the conversation. But before that, I need to say welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right, great. Good to have you guys. You got big brands, you got big budgets, you got big things going on, and in my mind's eye, that also means you have big risk. So talk to me about how you and maybe the organization weighs the risk of things that we're doing in the social world, these new areas, versus the reward. What's the philosophy? How do you guys handle that in general? If you can comment to it either on the personal side of departments you handle or from a company side.
Looking at examples, I think, of what others have done has really helped. I think majority of his here are more on the B2B, a little bit on the B2C side as well, but I think the B2C companies have really put themselves out there and kind of helped pave the way for B2B. So a lot of times we're able to look at those company examples and say, hey, look what who so-and-so is doing and the rewards that they're getting by the risks they're taking, and using that example for us to then follow in their footsteps.
So you wait for Intel to do something and say, okay, Ekaterina, can you please hurry up with that campaign because I need to see some results so I can get a budget for it.
Definitely not all the time, but a lot of times when it comes to social media, that happens to be the way that things are happening.
Yeah. We do talk a lot, and I think that's the way, especially when something new is coming along, that's the way to do it is, brands talking to each other, figuring out anything new, there's always risks, and everything new is always perceived as way more risk than something that you already, the road that you've already traveled. So the bottom line is if you don't do it, there's way more risk to not doing it than actually starting to, get into this conversations online and starting to actually experiment with, what works and what doesn't work for your brand. So, quite honestly, I think the key thing is really take risks, which is one of the values at Intel to begin with, but in social media specifically, and just try things out, see how other brands performing, how they're doing, learn as you go, and make sure you communicate those learnings out to the rest of the company so that they know, what works and what doesn't work. But basically, if you're afraid, not much is going to happen, really. So
yeah. So it's time to take some risk and learn and fail quickly, and then move fast.
Fail quickly and smartly. Gotcha. Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. Lauren, I know you handle more of the search side of things, but how does social media play into your world over there?
So I work on a lot of the different social media advertising initiatives, doing things on YouTube, on Facebook, trying out Twitter, trying out things like LinkedIn, and using those more from an advertising perspective on what you can and can't do. And I think fail quickly is a really great way to figure it out. Is there's a lot of new technology, a lot of new different mediums out there, and you need to try it. You need to see what works, what's not going to work. But as soon as you figure it out, move on to the next thing. If it doesn't work, you can try it a different way, or you can just try something altogether.
Gotcha. Well, and Dell has probably the most classic case study of failure out there known to man. Not that we want to go as far down that pipe, but Adrian, what's the approach over there in terms of social? Any thoughts regarding that?
Customer first, really.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing all the time. Is the measurement, net promoter score, and how does that tie back to how we have those relationships managed across, not just the marketing, but also in the social media space. The risk being balanced out by a lot of education. So educating internally, educating externally to the customer, saying we're out there, here's our Twitter handles, here's where to contact us if there's a service problem and you happen to be on Facebook, there's apps for that. There's all kinds of things where the more you educate people that you're out there and that you're having a two-way, the better the relationship and the better customer experience that you get.
Yeah, I love it. So speaking of customer relationship, talk to me about monitoring. How are you guys monitoring and measuring kind of what's happening out there? And it's one thing to talk about, we are monitoring and we have these clout scores that we're looking at or whatever it may be, but what are you doing with that data afterwards? Are you actually doing anything, or are you just kind of like, ooh, that's cool and okay, because it is kind of cool, but any examples you guys can share?
We use Radian 6 as a basic monitoring tool, and we have everything set up in different buckets. We also have Salesforce has an integration with TweetDeck, where if it comes up in TweetDeck, it logs a case in Salesforce if it's certain complaints.
That's kind of cool.
So if someone's unhappy with our brand, logs a case, so one of our salespeople or customer service people can immediately go and start engaging that person and dealing with them and making sure it doesn't become a big issue. And a lot of what we're doing is separating out potential sales opportunities, potential customer complaints and just customer evangelists, and coming up with different ways to interact with and empower each group.
Gotcha. Other good examples of that, monitoring, measuring, action?
Yeah, we're also using Radian 6 pretty heavily, and I think different parts of our business are at different levels of adoption and maturity of how they're using that data. One of our more advanced teams is our small and medium business group, and they've created a hierarchy of, or maybe not a hierarchy, but really just a flow of information, workflow, to say if it's a technical question, it's going to go to somebody in our product marketing team. If it's support, it's going to go to somebody in support. If it's sales, it goes to sales. And they've got catchers, if you will, for the different types of comments and questions and things that are coming across the web, and they're doing that active listening. And so we're now going to be taking that model to the next level and tying it more into our Salesforce.com and looking at how we can better tie in the data. But we really want to, our sales team in particular is very finicky about not getting too much garbage in Salesforce.com. We want real leads. So putting a process in place to have somebody help filter out that data. Is it a real lead before it goes into Salesforce? And then, is it a real support issue, or is it a matter of just sending them to a quick link? So when does it actually get logged? And so we're in the process of getting to that level of maturity with that particular team.
Gotcha. I like that, catchers. That's the first time I've heard that phrase. Yeah, people just catching these tweets like, oh.
Because you do have so much.
Right.
I mean, there's over 20,000 mentions of Cisco on a daily basis. And,
Yeah.
we need a way of figuring out who did that go to. We have 70,000 employees. Is it going to?
Right. Well, the question is, do you catch all of these things? I mean, are all of them really valid? Like, how do you guys parse out the data by keyword or by certain?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so I think listening is one part, right? And what you can use listening for is to identify where your customers hang out. If there's a business unit who doesn't know, here's our set of customers, whatever they're, developers or consumers, and where do we go participate? You don't want to create your own new communities. You want to go to them. You want to go what's comfortable for them. So where are those communities? So successfully identifying that and successfully identifying, what are they talking about? What are the key topics? Is it, positive and negative sentiment? This is great. There's also analytics, right? So, and different analytics tools just kind of get attached to, if you will, to different social network. There's nothing right there right now that kind of ties it together. Maybe there's a tool or two that does several at the same time, but then you go in and you say, okay, I have number of communities or places where I engage with my customers. What is that analytics data giving me? And then you start applying it and then saying, okay, based on what I know for the past X months, this is how I'm going to change my content strategy based on what I know, or this is how I'm going to change my approach altogether. Is my tone correct, et cetera, et cetera. And then these are just examples. You can go on, and then you apply the right analytics or measurements, to the right strategies, and you try making decisions versus just knowing, the vanity data, my followers and fans and what are my other big numbers. But then you just basically dig deeper and say, how do I apply it to a specific strategy or specific approach? And that's where it really gets helpful.
It's like, we used to have these conversations about creating our own communities, but if you're not a brand that people want to hang out with, right?
Absolutely.
Give it up. You know what I'm saying? You can't have a community unless it's people that want to hang out with you. Maybe the engineer does want to hang out with the other Cisco engineer, and that is a community you can create online. But if you think somebody's going to hang out with Intel just because you created it, I think that's kind of a learning lessons I heard kind of weaved in there. It's a nice one. So talk to me more about using some of this monitoring data. I was taking some notes there, and do you use any of this data to help your other online efforts? Do you use it for SEO, for example? Do you use it to affect the subject line in an email campaign? I mean, because this stuff seems like it's a gold mine to affect, the other forward-facing marketing efforts out there.
I think sort of in the opposite perspective is when we first started coming up with what to monitor, what not to monitor in social media, they went, well, what search keywords are we looking at? And it became, social's not search. You can't look at what search keywords. When people are communicating on Twitter, on blogs, on the in social media, they're not typing in search keywords. They're typing in questions. They're typing in more information. So we had, in a lot of ways, had to completely change how we're looking at social media. What are we looking for? Are we looking for, since it's Salesforce, is it something like CRM reviews versus, just CRM? What kind of keywords do we use to filter? So we had to take a very different approach to it.
Yeah.
And now we're using a lot of what people are giving back to us as what's important to them and what's important to a lot of people in social media. We're coming back and using for different marketing campaigns. So had to sort of start from scratch with social and then took everything backwards and said, well, can we apply this to our marketing campaigns? If this is what people think is important, we need to now start messaging it from the beginning instead of after they tell us.
Yeah, that because email gets left out of this conversation with social. In fact, there's conversation about social killing email, which is a little ridiculous at this point.
Yeah.
May happen, but not anywhere around the horizon. But one of the things that seems to be missed out there, and I don't know if you guys have seen the same thing, is what a great way to build your list. I mean, you can get these people engaged quickly on Twitter, and then if you can give them a good enough offer to come to a landing page to give an email address, and it's a great list building or micro list building even within that channel itself. Are you guys using it to build lists or to build any of that database that we all covet so much?
We're not using it to build lists, but we are kind of in the next phase of our social CRM process. Is how do we tie the social data with the more traditional data into one contact person, so that we have multiple ways of contacting them, and then some of their history. So if we keep history of if we've emailed them and if we've given them offers, but we're not today capturing the social interactions that we're having with them. But that's where we want to get to, and so we're in the process of how do we connect these two systems and these two databases to do that. Very
cool. You're getting a more full spectrum of the individual versus just some basic demographic information and some contact info, and that's it.
And Facebook has really allowed us to do that. So we're the way that we're going to be doing that is we're implementing Facebook Connect so that people can log in to Cisco.com eventually with Facebook.
Really?
So
that's the first time I've heard a B2B company doing that out there.
We'll be rolling that out in the next few months.
Very progressive.
And that data that we're then able to capture from Facebook, and it's a lot of that more personal social data, will be tied, and we can really marry those two and see a full picture of who that person is.
Gotcha. Cool. I like that. That kind of goes back to a little bit of that privacy and trust factor. Any thoughts about how to maintain that trust that's so important to your constituents when we have all this access to information? Like, where do you kind of draw the line? And I know we all have our corporate policies, so happy to get that answer, but anything else beyond that would be great.
I think it's giving them the choices. I mean, it's not going to be the only choice, right? So they can still log in the more traditional ways, and then putting it very clearly out there that if you're connecting with Facebook, for example, that you're sharing more data.
Yep, great.
Yeah, education, I think, and just talking to them, just talking to them and letting them know. I mean, there's so many applications that you're using for different campaigns and different touch points with your customers, but, as soon as you go into the app, right, it says, well, allow access, or, provide you information, especially if it's contest, you provide at least email address so you can contact them back. A lot of people, that's not comfortable for a lot of people. So we've seen it on our Facebook campaigns before where why are you guys collecting my data? And you just reply back and you say, well, first of all, if you are a winner, email is the only way we can contact you. Second of all, the reason why we're asking your age is because Facebook requires that. And of course, we build it for application. Again, a requirement for Facebook to run any type of campaigns when you give something away or have pretty, any type of prizes. That's another requirement. Folks don't understand that and don't know that. Plus, you have to allow access to the application, because that's just how that's how infrastructure works.
Yeah, right.
So once you talk them through it, once you educate them and give them actual real answers, they go, oh great, well, and you get answers like, I trust Intel, that's why I'm a fan, that's why I want to participate, but now I am way more informed and I feel more comfortable engaging with you.
I like that. More informed means more trust. That's
Absolutely.
a good equation. Yep. Lauren?
I would just sort of echo that and go with that level of transparency you need to give people if you're collecting different data points, or if you're using something like a Facebook Connect, letting people know what you're doing and have more of an opt-in policy versus an opt-out policy, which is when we start merging different data points. As a marketer, I never want people to opt in. I always want to automatically opt in.
Yes.
But for building trust and security, especially with integrating different sort of databases, it's opt-in makes people feel a little bit better about the entire situation.
So getting closer to the opt-in, because obviously data sets makes opt-in a very challenging question to answer, for sure. Adrian, any thoughts on trust and privacy?
Yeah, absolutely. The transparency is obviously, I totally agree with that. But also adding the value, what kind of, what are you getting out of this, sharing of data, right? Just collect data, but also engage with them, provide content, or, deliver some value there, or else, and I think the other piece about handing over the info becomes less of a invasion if they feel like they're getting something.
Good. I like it. So my final question kind of parlays off that, but it's more about how we're handling our own privacy policies. And Facebook's a great example, right? Because we now have these business profiles and we have these personal lives, and they're all kind of coming together. And so one of the things we like to ask everybody is, what is your own personal policy in handling who gets to see what on, let's say, your Facebook profile? And then after that, I'd love to hear one thing, if I'm your friend on Facebook, that I wouldn't know that you could share with us, so everybody who's watching right now knows a little bit more about you than they would even on Facebook itself. So policy, and then one unique thing you got to come up with here. Start with the easy things on policy. What is your personal professional policy on Facebook? Start there.
I guess you're looking at me. So
Well, you're closest. You're closest. We can start over there. We can start anywhere.
You know, I tried keeping them separate in the beginning, but I think the culture in general that we're in is blending those lines. So people that I meet at conferences want to friend me on Facebook.
Yeah.
So
people that interview you friend you on Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. People, random people like Aaron come find me on Facebook. I want to be your friend. I'm like, I don't know.
And
for
then
really
hit send, not hit send, accept, not accept.
So
shit.
I've kind of given up on trying to keep it separate, though, and I've, Facebook is definitely a little bit more of the personal side. But you know what? We share personal things even when we're at work. I mean, that's how we build relationships with people at the end of the day.
Yep.
So I've decided that was okay, and I share things that I'm okay sharing publicly.
Yep.
I do only have, if you go to my Facebook profile, you won't see anything unless you are friended me. So I do have to have that one level of accept.
Yep.
Well, same here. I the same way. Except, and it's really hard. I struggle with it every day, but I do keep my Facebook profile settings set so that only my friends see what I talk about, and I have only friends friending me and accepting friend requests, as well as some of the coworkers. So I'm not actually accepting any requests outside of that. And then if people, ask, I basically say, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. If I know you, if I work with you in any capacity, that's what LinkedIn is for. Twitter, I'm more liberal on Twitter because I believe in the ability to connect, and so I want folks to connect with me. If they want to send me a direct message or communicate with me there, I accept pretty much anybody. Some people can argue that that's a wrong policy, but this is me. I love being able to chat with people, and I've met a ton of people on Twitter that I didn't know and then met face to face, and there's several that became good friends later on, which is interesting.
That happens all the time in the most unique scenarios.
Exactly. It's amazing. But one thing you don't know that you would know if you're a friend is that I don't share pictures of my daughter on Facebook.
Right.
People sometimes get upset. We want an update. Well, I'll send you an email. But that is just the policy that I've taken, and there's certain things that I won't be sharing on Facebook or anywhere else. But my policy is, you don't want information out there, you don't share it anywhere, period. So every time I send anything out for any network, I think, do I want it out there?
Yeah, protecting the princess policy, I see.
Okay,
gotcha.
That's right,
Great.
that's right.
If I would be embarrassed if my mother or grandmother saw it, I will not have it on Facebook.
Amen.
Outside of that, there's nothing about me on Facebook that I'm ashamed for other people to see. With that said, no embarrassing photos or photos from childhood are allowed to be tagged with me on Facebook.
That I wish Facebook would allow you to
to
accept those things.
Those get deleted as soon as they come up.
Talk about a monitoring policy, monitoring who's tagging you, right?
Exactly.
My third grade picture does not belong on the internet, nor does anybody care
I don't know.
about
I think
my
some of your
third
friends would
grade.
disagree, me included. So any unique things you can share with us we wouldn't know if we happen to be your Facebook friend?
That's a good one. I don't know. I take boxing classes, and that's my random fun fact about me.
There you go. All right. Be weary.
That's the
right?
be weary comment of if someone tries to rob us on the walk over to
Or if somebody tries to Facebook friend you and they haven't met you, they're coming over with boxing lessons.
with you. You're my new best friend.
Lauren, lead the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Adrian, what's your policy and what's interesting?
Yeah, I mean, much like they were saying, I was trying to keep them separate, personal and professional, back when Facebook started out, but really kind of just meshed it all together, and now it's a bunch of marketers that I work with on Facebook more than my friends in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, it actually makes it easy to protect myself, because marketers know they don't, they're not going to post a crazy photo of you and tag you without asking you. And that's kind of the unwritten code, I think, that kind of goes there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty free spirited. I think I rarely ignore or decline an invite unless I don't know them at all.
Right.
It's just somebody coming in.